The Cossack Squat is going to challenge your mobility and strength. And because there's a lot of mobility involved, everyone's going to look a little different doing it. So don't judge yourself compared to somebody else. Just work with the range of motion you have and work to increase it over time. I'm going to do the demonstrations body weight, but I'll also show you some regressions to make them easier and how to load them to make them heavier. I will say that having a little bit of load, especially in the goblet position, can actually make them less awkward because having a counterbalance in front of your body can really help, even if it's just a light dumbbell or kettlebell. And because a counterweight in front of your body can be really helpful, if you're just doing a body weight, I recommend putting the arms out in front of you to give yourself a counterbalance that you can really sit into without losing your balance. So again, even if it's just body weight, putting your arms out in front of you can really help you from falling backwards as you sit into each rep. Now, for the setup, pick a pretty wide stance. I find that people should go wider than they originally suspect. It's not that going wider makes it harder. Actually, it's a little bit more challenging if you stay narrow. So pick a nice wide stance to start, but you'll probably have to tinker with that sometimes. Next, you want a little bit of external rotation of the feet, meaning they're pointed a little bit out. But again, pointing them out more does not make it easier. It makes it a little more awkward, actually. So point them mostly forward with a little bit of external rotation. As you execute the lift, I want you to try and keep your hips and shoulders facing mostly forward like this. What I don't want is, as you go down, to just dump and rotate towards the non-working side. Next, I want you to look at what my non-working side is doing here. I'm letting that leg externally rotate and my toe point to the ceiling. That's going to help me get a little bit deeper. If you feel like you have really great mobility, you can try and keep that foot planted like this, and it's going to challenge your inner thigh or your adductor a little bit more. But for most of you, I recommend externally rotate that leg, point the toe up, and you'll be able to get deeper by shifting the stretch onto your hamstrings a little bit more. Now, while I do want you to keep your chest mostly up because we are flexing at the hip, the chest is going to come down a little bit, and that's okay. So as you're coming down, my chest is facing down a little bit, but I'm not dumping forward like this. When it comes to your heels, I want both heels on the ground. So if I'm going down to this side and I'm finding that my heel is elevating in my pursuit of getting full depth like this, what I'd rather you do is just grab a wedge, place it under that side, and you'll find that as you go down, you can go nice and deep while keeping the heel down, which is the whole point of the wedge. However, if you do this, just do one side at a time. Don't put a wedge under each side. Do the same side 5 to 10 reps, and then switch the wedge over to the other side and do the other leg. Do not alternate. It's a little awkward for me to do this motion with the wedge under my foot. And then remember to come back to the top position here between reps and just do a little second here as a reset and then go into the other side like that. You're not trying to kind of stay low like this, although that is one way to do it. That's not the way I want you doing it. Now, you're not a little baby if you need to start with a regression. This is an incredibly challenging exercise from a technique and mobility perspective. There are 3 ways you can make it easier. The first was using the wedge if you feel like you're limited by ankle mobility. But if it's your hips and balance and some of the technique, this is my favorite way to make it easier. Stand over your bench in that same position, wide stance, feet mostly forward with some external rotation, and then just bring the bench up a couple clicks like this. I have mine on roughly 35 degrees, something like belly button height. And then you can actually use the bench as a counterbalance to sit a little bit deeper, and you can actually kind of sit back a little bit more and just start to get used to that inner thigh, that hamstring stretch, some of the other parts of the technique. And so you've kind of eliminated the balance component, and you can just go through the movement a little bit easier and just expose yourself to that stretch a little bit. This can also be a great thing for just warming up before doing them. So you might not be using this for a working set, but you might do a set or something like this just to get loosened up. And it doesn't need to be a bench. You can use a countertop. You can use your squat rack and kind of hold on to the cable rack as you're going through the movement, something to reduce the balance component of the exercise. Another way to make it a little bit easier is to elevate the working side. And so again, if you're using a wedge or this method, don't alternate back and forth, just do one side and then switch. By elevating the working side, we reduce the mobility component a little bit and you can get a little bit deeper, although I do find the wedge to be a little bit more helpful because I think ankle mobility can be a real limiter on this one. When it comes to adding load, I recommend using a single dumbbell in a goblet position, remember, because having a weight out in front of you can help counterbalance your hips and butt going backwards a little bit. And so using a single dumbbell in the goblet position like this can really help reinforce good technique by providing a counterweight for you to be able to sit back without falling backwards with each rep. Another comfortable way, but a little bit more cumbersome, is loading it with a landmine in the goblet position like this. It gives you that same counterbalance, but also gives you a little bit of stability because this thing is pressed into the floor or one of these landmine things.